I don't stop for strangers in Lagos traffic. I don't roll my window down in a storm, and I definitely don't invite trouble into my car. But the day I saw a boy holding two babies in the rain, I told my driver to hit the brakes, because when one of those babies looked up, I saw my dead husband's eyes staring back at me. Tell me something, if it were you, would you have kept driving? Or would you have stepped into a mess you knew could rearrange your whole life? My name is Amora People. In this city know me as the woman with the white mansion and the black gate, the widow who never repeats an outfit, the one who signs the checks and keeps her face straight, tall, light-skinned hair pinned in a perfect chignon voice like a closed door. They call it elegance, I call it armor. My husband Dyke died 3 years ago, and after that the house learned to be quiet, not the comforting kind of quiet, the kind where your heels echo down a hallway and you feel like a guest in your own life. You know what I mean? That Thursday, the sky went heavy and gray, the kind of gray that sits on your shoulders. Rain started as a whisper and then turned into a drumline on the windshield. My driver asked if I wanted the shortcut, and I said no, Ozumba Mbadiwe. I needed predictability, not speed. The board had already rescheduled me to 5 p.m., and I was not about to dance to their music. We rolled to a red light, wipers ticking in time with my thoughts, vendors sprinting for shelter horns, layering in a tired chorus. And then I saw him, a skinny boy, barefoot in pooling water hair, plastered to his head, holding a baby in each arm like his life depended on staying balanced. The babies were wrapped in plastic, not blankets. Plastic faces, slick with rain, crying. A thin little cry that still managed to cut through the glass. I leaned forward without meaning to, and when one twin blinked up at me, my breath just left my body. Hazel eyes, light brown with a ring of gold, the exact color I kissed goodnight for 10 years. Wait, let me say that again. My dead husband's eyes. I opened the car door before common sense could catch me. Silk dress heels, whatever water is only water when a child is crying. I walked up to the boy and said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Toby." Voice small, shoulders tense, trying to shield the babies from the rain, with his own body like he could be an umbrella. I asked, "They're yours," he nodded too quickly. Said yes, then no. Then yes again, said he was 13, and their father and I almost snapped back something sharp. But the way he held those babies stopped the words in my throat, because I have seen executives cradle million-dollar deals with less care than this child held those girls. "Where's their mother?" I asked. He said she died when they were born. "Get in the car," I told him, and my driver froze like I just ordered a coup. I waved my hand and said it again, with the voice I save for rooms full of men who forget I built half of what they enjoy, and the boy climbed in, wet and shaking, saying, "Please don't take them." And I said, "We're not taking them from you, you're coming with us." Inside the Range Rover, the heat kicked in. I wrapped the twins in my scarf and a shawl, little bodies shivering, then slowly easing. The boy sat on the edge of the leather, like it would swallow him, eyes darting between me and the babies, to make sure I didn't vanish them with a blink. We drove through gates that have kept kings out, and he wiped his feet on the mat so he wouldn't dirty my floor. That detail, that little gesture, I felt something move in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The house became a quiet emergency room, housekeeper with towels, Dr. Martens with his black bag, quick warm bowls of water. A tiny drip hung like a thread of mercy over each crib. The doctor said they were cold and hungry, but stable, and I asked the boy what he fed them. He said pap, when he could soaked bread, when he couldn't milk if a miracle happened. "Where do you live?" I asked. "Behind the church, under the wooden shed," he said, eyes down, and the picture in my head was a child standing between a city and two babies making himself a wall. Now here's the part where a woman like me is supposed to hand the problem off, call social services, write a generous check, return to the meeting at 5. But my life took a hard left because I could not shake those eyes. That night, I unlocked a room I had not entered since the funeral. Dyke's study, the air tasted like dust and old cologne. I opened drawers I had kept closed and found a small wooden box tied with a thin ribbon, letters inside. Not my handwriting, not my perfume soft at the folds like they'd been read and read again. Dyke, thank you for coming last weekend. Toby was so happy. One letter said the name Toby like a pin to the heart. Another said, tell your wife the truth, it's time. I sat down because my legs quit on me and I asked myself out loud, if it were you, what would you have done? Pretend you never saw or walk straight into the fire? I called the doctor at midnight, said I want a DNA test, compare the twins to Dyke's autopsy sample. He paused like a man caught between medicine and gossip, then said, yes, madam. While we waited, I asked the boy more questions that mattered. How old are they? 7 months. What are their names? Chidima and Chisom, did you name them? Yes, he said. It's shy and proud at the same time, like a kid who had to grow up in a single sentence. The next morning at breakfast, a table as long as a swimming pool, I told him to eat. He broke bread into small bites and fed himself slow, like someone who had learned not to scare good fortune away by being greedy. And when I asked why he lied about being the father, he stared at his hands and said, people don't help if you say you're just a brother, but when I say I'm their father, they listen. I don't like lies, but I understood that some doors only open for certain kinds of pain. 2 days later, a brown envelope landed in my palm. It felt heavy even though it wasn't. I carried it into my office, shut the door, told my hands to stop shaking, and read the first line. DNA match, confirmed probability of paternity, %. I didn't cry, not right then. I just felt the room tilt, and the last 3 years of my marriage play in reverse, all those fertility appointments, all those careful words, like maybe we're both the problem. All those nights I fell asleep feeling like an empty room inside my own body, while he was out there building a secret life that didn't even have the courage to say its name. Here's your twist, the one that flips the table. The babies were my husband's daughters and the boy was his son. Yeah, that happened. If you think I hated them for it, you don't know. Grief, the anger didn't aim at children. It aimed at the man who told me we were a team, the man who let me carry a shame that wasn't mine. When I looked at those twins, all I felt was a heat in my chest that said, mine, and I don't mean ownership. I mean responsibility. I mean protection. I mean the kind of love that shows up with paperwork and late nights and rice on a plate. I hired a private investigator, a quiet man, who moves like a rumor, gave him the mother's first name, Adesua, and a few scraps of memory from Toby. By evening, he sent me a simple story that hurt more because of how ordinary it was. Primary school teacher, small room behind the school, never married a man, in a big car, some weekends. A clinic that handled the twins' birth and her death on the same night. A neighbor who said the boy refused the orphanage because he promised he would take care of his sisters himself. Do you think that's fair, a 13-year-old shouldering 2 babies, because we adults prefer tidy stories to messy truths? The house didn't stay silent about any of this. Houses like mine talk guards. Whisper to drivers, drivers to cooks, cooks to cousins, and cousins to uncles who arrive in black SUVs like bad weather. On Sunday afternoon, Chief Emma Dyke's older brother walked into my living room without asking. Chest out, eyes sharp, 2 cousins behind him, wearing dark glasses indoors, like that makes a man serious. Is it true, he asked, and I slid the DNA across the table the way you slide an invoice you know will be paid. He read it without blinking, then pointed at me, a classic mistake, and said, even if they're his, they're not yours. I stood slow and calm and said, they carry his blood, and I carry his name, this house and half the company, They are not strangers here. He laughed about street boys and heirs, said the family would take over because I had no children, and I told him Toby could learn to hold a spoon and a balance sheet faster than they could learn to hold their tongues. Did it help? Not really. But sometimes a line is not for them, it's for you. The board called the next morning, all of them suddenly concerned about optics and stability, and investor confidence, one suggested. I take a break from my own company until the storm passed, and I said thank you and hung up, and told my lawyer to draw papers, guardianship school enrollment. Update my will, he warned me. I was starting a war, and I told him no, I'm ending one. Then I did the thing no one expected the marble woman to do. I held a press conference, plain black dress, no earrings, no armor, just the weight of truth, cameras popping like small thunder. And I said it out loud, my husband had another family. I found them in the rain. I ordered a DNA test. Here are the results. Truth doesn't care about feelings, it just is. A reporter asked, "Are you adopting them?" And I said, "I'm doing more." "I'm raising them," another asked. "What about the company?" And I said I built half of it, and I will not be pushed aside. A third asked if this was revenge, and I smiled the kind of smile that ends conversations. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. Chief Emma filed in court to have me declared unfit, said I was grief-drunk and making reckless choices that could stain the family name, asked the judge to freeze the estate and take the children. We walked into a packed courtroom, wood shining like a polished lie. His lawyer talked about strangers and rumors. My lawyer held up science and care, DNA and medical records, nanny statements, the best interest of the children. And then we waited 3 long days while the internet did what it does, half calling me foolish, half calling me brave, most not knowing what to do with a woman who refuses to play by rules that weren't written for her. In that gap, I learned fear has a taste, metallic and thin. Toby pretended to read, but listened for footsteps in the hallway, asked me once, "If they take us, will you come with us?" And I said, "They won't." And he said, "But if," and that if carved a notch into my heart, I can still feel with my fingers. The judge kept guardianship with me, said my actions, while untraditional, were in the children's best interest, told the board to behave like adults and respect the new facts. Chief Emma said he would appeal, and the clerk gave the smallest eye roll I've ever seen, the kind that says, "Bless your heart, try it." Outside, I told the cameras I didn't fight for power, I fought for 3 children. The world forgot, one of them saved their lives, now I'll spend the rest of mine saving his. And if you think that line was for the public, maybe it was, but it was also for me. After that, the house thawed. Not all at once, not in a movie montage, just little by little. Laughter in the mornings, sneakers squeaking on marble, tiny hands leaving prints we'd wipe tomorrow. Toby stood in a crisp school uniform by the door, anxious and taller, somehow. I straightened his collar, handed him a small notebook, said, "Write your dreams in here, and one day you'll see how far you walked." He tucked it into his pocket, like it was priceless. Looked up and said, "Thank you, Auntie." Then paused, eyes wide. "Can I call you Mom?" And my mouth said yes before my mind caught up. I hired tutors and a public speaking coach, but the best class happened at our long table with chips in a bowl between us, where I taught him how shares become votes, and votes become decisions, and decisions become lives. Some nights he crushed it, some nights he crashed, once he snapped at the nanny and locked himself in his room. I found him on the floor, with his hands in his hair, like he could pull the day out, he whispered. "What if I fail you?" And I said. "Then we start again," he asked. "What if I disappoint you?" And I told him. "You can't. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be loved." Of course, life doesn't stop throwing curveballs, because you win a case one night at 2 a.m. Chisholm burned with fever. We drove through wet streets to the hospital. The doctor said, viral, and hooked her to a drip. Toby held her hand and didn't blink for hours. When the fever broke, his shoulders dropped. He looked at me and said, "Her," I said. "No." He said, "I love you too," and that was the moment I cried for healing, not pain. At the company, a few board members tried to test my resolve with polite knives. With all due respect is how they start when they mean the opposite. I slid a file across the table and said, "A 13-year-old found outdated numbers on our website and wrote a fix, if that's emotion. We need more of it." They shut up, we moved on. When the house finally felt full enough to breathe, I called my lawyer about the foundation. We named it for the woman I never met, the Adesua Foundation, to help single mothers and children on the edge, and boys who carry babies through rain. The launch was simple: teachers, doctors, social workers, no gossip press. I spoke about love, showing up late and choosing to stay. Toby asked if he could speak, took the mic with both hands, like it might break, and told the room he used to beg on the street and carry his sisters through dust and hunger. Then he looked at me and said, "She didn't give birth to me, but she gave me life." The room stood. Cameras flashed. We didn't notice. Later that night, under a good sky, the kind with a breeze that doesn't want anything from you, he sat beside me and asked, "Why did you stop that day?" And I thought about wipers beating time, a red light, blinking a boy, making himself into a wall, and two hazel-eyed girls blinking up at me like a dare. I said, "I don't know." Something in me moved. I couldn't drive away. He nodded and said, "Thank you for not driving away." I squeezed his hand and said, "I thank God every day I didn't." 3 years rolled forward like they do when you put your hands to work. The twins ran and argued about cups and colors and who gets the purple ribbon. Toby's voice dropped, shoulders widened, handwriting straightened. He led a school debate on the rights of street children and came home with a grin that cracked the last pieces of marble off me one rainy evening. I asked my driver to stop at the same spot where all this began. I stood there a minute with my umbrella and thought about how some beginnings only look like accidents when you're far away. Up close, they're instructions. Back home, he was at the table drafting a speech. The twins were sprawled with picture books. He looked up and said, "Serious, Mom. I want to study law. I want to fight for kids like me, for mothers like Adesua." I looked at him, at them, at a house that used to echo and now hums, and said, "Then you will. You already make me proud." He half laughed, like he didn't believe me, and maybe that doubt will keep him honest. People ask if I forgave my husband, and here's where some of you will argue with me. I don't know if forgiveness is the word, but I will tell you this: his worst mistake gave me my greatest gift, and I'm not letting bitterness steal what grace delivered. Do you think that's fair, or should I have torn his memory down brick by brick? Tell me in the comments. I can take the heat. Before we end, let me give you a compass you can keep for the day. Your sky turns gray when the truth shows up in the rain holding babies. It won't look like a blessing. It will look like a problem. When your heart says stop, stop. When fear says you're not ready, remember, you were born ready for the one thing that's yours to do. And when the world points at you and says those are not yours, ask yourself the only question that matters: will they suffer if I do nothing? I used to be the woman with the perfect gait and the polished floor and the shoes that clicked like promises. Oh, I'm the woman with a badly wrapped sandwich in her bag, because little hands made it with piano scales at 7 p.m., with foundation paperwork under a stack of coloring pages, with court transcripts marked by sticky notes, and a notebook full of a boy's dreams. I carry a name that used to be heavy and now sits light because love is holding the other end. So let's talk. If it were you at that red light, would you have stopped? Would you have cracked your window and let a different life in, or would you have told yourself someone else will handle it? Do you think the court got it right? Should blood and truth be enough to redefine a family? Or should money and order keep their neat lines no matter who it hurts? I know where I stand, your turn. And hey, if this story stirred anything in you, don't just scroll, drop your take. Argue with me, tell me what you would have done, share this with the one person who needs to hear that. And looks nothing like what you were waiting for, hit subscribe. If you want more stories told straight with the mess and the mercy left in, and I'll see you in the next one.